Imagine living in a town that looks like a vacation postcard. Pastel houses, palm trees, a beach 5 minutes from your front door. But you're driving 45 minutes inland every night because you can't afford to actually live there. That's the reality in some of Florida's most beautiful small towns. In this video, we're going to look at 7 picture-perfect places that tourists adore, retirees are flocking to, and where the people who serve the drinks, teach the kids, and fix the roofs are being slowly priced out. Before you fall in love with these towns on Instagram, you need to see what it really costs to call them home. Mount Dora sits in central Florida, about 30 miles northwest of Orlando, on the shores of Lake Dora. The town has genuine charm, a historic downtown with antique shops, art galleries, independent restaurants, and tree-lined streets, Victorian and New England-style architecture that feels transported from somewhere cooler and older. Annual festivals draw crowds, especially the Mount Dora Art Festival, one of the most prestigious outdoor art shows in the Southeast. The population is around 16,300, and it skews older. The median age is 55. This is a retirement destination, has been for decades. People come here for the small-town atmosphere, the lakes, the slower pace, and the fact that it's close enough to Orlando for convenience, but far enough to feel separate. The setting is pleasant. Not dramatic, but pleasant. Lakefront parks, oak trees with Spanish moss. A lighthouse, though Lake Dora is nowhere near the ocean. The downtown is walkable, genuinely so, which is rare in Florida. But let's talk about the economics. Median household income is about $51,000. The median home price has reached $425,000. That's more than 8 times the annual income. For a town that markets itself as an affordable alternative to coastal Florida, those numbers tell a different story. What's happened is this. Mount Dora became popular. It got written up in retirement magazines, named one of the best small towns in America. And people noticed. Retirees with equity from selling homes up north moved in. Investors bought properties for short-term rentals to serve the festival crowds and Disney tourists looking for something quaint. The result is a town where the people who work, who serve in the restaurants and shops, who maintain the parks and teach in the schools, increasingly can't afford to live. They commute from Eustis, Tavares, Leesburg, towns nearby where housing is cheaper but climbing fast. Mount Dora still functions as a community. There are local families, multi-generational residents, but the balance is shifting. The town is becoming what it attracts. Retirees and tourists, the working-age population, the families with young children are being priced out. Fernandina Beach sits on Amelia Island, Florida's northernmost barrier island, just south of the Georgia border. This is Old Florida, not the Miami glitz or the Gulf Coast Resort Florida. The town has a 50-block historic district with Victorian homes, brick streets, and a working shrimp boat fleet. The beaches are wide and uncommercial. The downtown has maintained its character through strict preservation codes. The population is about 13,000. The median age is 52. Again, this skews older, though not as dramatically as some Florida towns. Fernandina Beach attracts people looking for coastal living without the density of Jacksonville or the tourist crowds of Northeast Florida's other beach towns. The island has natural beauty, undeveloped stretches of beach, maritime forests, marshlands where you can kayak through winding waterways and see dolphins, manatees, herons. Fort Clinch State Park occupies the northern tip, offering both Civil War history and pristine coastline. But the economics are tightening. Median household income is around $68,000. Median home price has reached $565,000, more than 8 times annual income. And that's average. Waterfront properties, even modest ones, easily exceed $1 million. The shrimping industry that defined Fernandina Beach for generations is dying. Not from lack of shrimp, though climate change and coastal development are affecting that too. It's dying because the people who shrimp can't afford to live on Amelia Island anymore. The shrimp boats still dock at the marina. You can still buy fresh shrimp right off the boat. But the fleet is shrinking. The younger generation isn't taking over. Why would they? You can't build a life on shrimping income when homes cost over $500,000. What's replacing the working waterfront is tourism and retiree services. Bed and breakfasts, boutique hotels, restaurants that serve tourists, not locals. The historic district is being preserved beautifully, but increasingly it's a museum staffed by people who commute from the mainland. Seaside is different from every other town on this list because it's not really a town. It's a planned community, built from scratch starting in 1981 on Florida's Panhandle along Highway 30A. The architectural style is new urbanism, deliberately designed to look like a traditional small town. Pastel-colored cottages with white picket fences, sandy pathways, a town square. Everything walkable and human-scaled. It's also where The Truman Show was filmed, which tells you something. Seaside looks perfect because it was designed to look perfect, and it does. The beaches are stunning, white sand and turquoise water. The town is immaculate, every detail curated. The population is listed as around 500, but almost nobody lives here year-round. This is a vacation community, second homes and rental properties. During summer and holiday weeks, it swells to thousands. The rest of the year, it's nearly empty. The median home price is $2.8 million for a cottage in a planned community that's 40 years old. The median household income of those who claim residency is about $95,000, but that number is almost meaningless given how few people actually live here. Seaside represents something specific. It's the commodification of small-town aesthetics. Everything that makes a traditional town appealing, the walkability, the architecture, the community spaces, has been recreated, but without the actual community, without the economic diversity, without the messiness and authenticity that comes from people living their actual lives. The stores in Seaside are boutiques, selling $200 sundresses and artisanal ice cream. The restaurants are upscale casual. There's no hardware store, no grocery store for actual weekly shopping, no school, no real infrastructure for permanent residents, because permanent residents aren't the point. The people who work in Seaside, who clean the rental properties, who staff the restaurants and shops, live in Panama City Beach, 20 miles away, or Freeport, Santa Rosa Beach, towns along the coast where housing is a fraction of Seaside's prices, though still climbing. Seaside is beautiful, objectively, aesthetically beautiful, but it's a simulacrum, a town-shaped resort, and its existence has driven up prices all along 30A, making the entire stretch of coast increasingly unaffordable for the people who've lived and worked there for generations. Sanibel Island sits off the southwest coast of Florida, connected to the mainland by a causeway. The island is famous for its shell-covered beaches, its commitment to preserving natural habitat, and its strict development codes that have kept it relatively uncommercial compared to other Florida barrier islands. The population is about 6,500, though that's year-round residents. During winter season, it more than doubles. The median age is 68. Sanibel is overwhelmingly a retirement and vacation destination. The island is beautiful in a specifically Florida way. White sand beaches, calm Gulf waters, wildlife refuges where you can see roseate spoonbills, alligators, manatees. The J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge covers a significant portion of the island, ensuring that large swaths remain undeveloped. But Sanibel also represents everything fragile about coastal Florida. In September 2022, Hurricane Ian made landfall near Sanibel as a Category 4 storm. The damage was catastrophic. The causeway was destroyed. Homes were obliterated. The island was cut off from the mainland for weeks. The causeway has been rebuilt. Many homes have been repaired or rebuilt. But the storm exposed something that was already true. Living on a barrier island in Florida is increasingly expensive and risky. Median home price on Sanibel is $1.1 million. Post-Ian, insurance costs have skyrocketed. Some homeowners are paying $20,000, $30,000, even $50,000 a year for insurance. Some can't get insurance at all. The state-backed insurer of last resort is overwhelmed and raising rates. The median household income is around $86,000, which sounds substantial until you factor in the housing costs and insurance. Even relatively wealthy retirees are struggling with the economics of coastal living in the age of more frequent, more intense hurricanes. The people who work on Sanibel, the small number who actually staff the restaurants, hotels, and services, have always lived on the mainland. After Ian, even fewer can consider living on the island. The risk is too high, the cost is too extreme. St. Augustine is the oldest continuously occupied European-established settlement in the continental United States, founded by the Spanish in 1565. That history is everywhere. The narrow streets of the old city, the Castillo de San Marcos, a 17th-century fort, Spanish colonial architecture mixed with Victorian and Gilded Age buildings. It's a living museum, and the town knows it. The population of the historic city itself is around 15,000, though the greater St. Augustine area is much larger. The economy is heavily dependent on tourism. Millions visit annually to walk the old streets, visit the fort, take ghost tours, eat at restaurants in buildings older than the United States. The setting is atmospheric: Spanish moss, hanging from live oaks, the Matanzas River, and intracoastal waterway. Beaches on Anastasia Island, just across the Bridge of Lions. The architecture is unique in Florida, with a European feel that doesn't exist anywhere else in the state. But the economics are familiar. Median household income is about $54,000. Median home price has reached $485,000, 9 times the annual income. And that's for the historic core. Prices drop as you move away from the center, but so does the charm that defines St. Augustine. The tourism economy creates a specific dynamic. The town needs workers, servers, hotel staff, museum docents, shop employees, tour guides. These are not high-wage jobs. But housing in St. Augustine, particularly anywhere near the historic district, is increasingly out of reach. So workers commute from Hastings, St. Augustine South, Elkton, from the outskirts where housing is cheaper and character is absent. They drive in to work in a 500-year-old city they can't afford to live in. The historic preservation that makes St. Augustine beautiful also makes it expensive. Maintaining old buildings costs more. Restrictions on what can be built limit housing supply. Tourism drives up property values and encourages short-term rentals, which remove housing from the long-term market. St. Augustine has multi-generational local families, people whose ancestors have been here for centuries. But that's changing. The young people leave. They can't compete with retirees and vacation home buyers. The city is being preserved perfectly. The fort will stand for centuries more. The Spanish Quarter looks as it did generations ago. But preservation without affordability creates a theme park, not a city. And St. Augustine is inching in that direction. Key West sits at the end of the Florida Keys, the southernmost point in the continental United States, 90 miles from Cuba and connected to the mainland by the Overseas Highway. The island is small, just 4.2 square miles, and every inch of it is valuable. The population is about 25,000, making it the largest town on this list, but it still functions as a small town. One main street, Duval Street, running from the Atlantic to the Gulf. Historic neighborhoods with Caribbean-influenced architecture. A laid-back island vibe mixed with tourist intensity. Key West has a specific cultural identity. It was an artist colony, a refuge for writers and painters and eccentrics. Hemingway lived here. The town embraced LGBT residents when much of Florida didn't. It has always been a place for outsiders, for people who didn't fit anywhere else. That identity still exists, but it's fading. Median household income is around $68,000. Median home price has reached $1.3 million, 19 times the annual income. For a small house on an island increasingly vulnerable to hurricanes and sea level rise, the artist colony is gone. You can't be a struggling artist when struggling means you can't afford a $3,000 a month studio apartment. The creative community that gave Key West its soul has been replaced by wealthy retirees and vacation homeowners. The people who work in Key West, and the island is entirely dependent on tourism, live in Marathon, Isla Mirada, even as far as Key Largo, 100 miles away. They commute down the Overseas Highway, sometimes spending 3 hours a day in their cars to serve drinks and clean hotel rooms in a town they'll never afford to live in. Hurricane risk compounds this. Key West sits barely above sea level. A direct hit from a major hurricane could be catastrophic. Insurance costs reflect this. Many properties are uninsurable through traditional markets. Those that are insured pay premiums that rival mortgage payments. But the bigger threat isn't a single storm. It's the slow rise of the ocean. King tides already flood streets in parts of Key West. In 30 years, 50 years, portions of the island will be underwater. Everyone knows this, and yet prices keep climbing. Because for the wealthy, Key West isn't a long-term investment, it's a lifestyle purchase, a place to own for however long it lasts. For the people who work there, who've built lives there, the calculation is different. They're being pushed out not by water, but by money. The Villages is unlike anywhere else in Florida, unlike anywhere else in America. It's a massive planned retirement community in Central Florida, spanning 3 counties with over 145,000 residents and still growing. It's not a small town in the traditional sense, it's a sprawling city built entirely for people over 55. And it's beautiful in its own manufactured way. Manicured golf courses, Spanish-style architecture, town squares with nightly entertainment, everything designed for ease, accessibility, and recreation. There are over 50 golf courses, more than 3,000 clubs and organizations, pickleball courts everywhere. Golf cart paths connecting the entire development. This is retirement as theme park. And it works. The residents are genuinely happy. The activities are endless. The weather is warm, healthcare is abundant and high quality, crime is low. For someone looking to retire actively, the Villages offers an unmatched lifestyle. But let's talk about what this model means for Florida. The median home price is around $420,000. The median household income is $58,000, mostly from Social Security and pensions. The economics work for retirees who sold homes elsewhere and moved here. But the Villages produces almost nothing. It's a consumption economy. The residents don't work. They recreate, they spend, but they don't produce. To sustain 145,000 residents, the Villages needs workers, tens of thousands of them. Restaurant workers, healthcare workers, maintenance crews, retail employees. Where do they live? Not in the Villages. The community is age-restricted. You must be 55 or older to buy. So the workers commute from Leesburg, Lady Lake, Wildwood, Summerfield. Towns surrounding the Villages where housing is cheaper but still climbing because of the demand created by serving a population of 145,000. The Villages represents a specific vision of aging in America, segregated by age, insulated from economic diversity, maintained by an invisible workforce that commutes in to serve a population that doesn't work. It's efficient, it's pleasant for the residents, but it's also deeply strange. A city-sized development where nobody is raising children, where schools don't exist, where the entire purpose is recreation and consumption. And it's reshaping Central Florida. The surrounding communities are becoming bedroom towns for service workers. The economy of the region is increasingly dependent on serving retirees who have resources but produce nothing locally. The Villages is beautiful if you're 55 or older and can afford to live there. The golf courses are immaculate. The town squares are charming. The lifestyle is active and social. But it's also a vision of Florida's future that's troubling when you think about it. A state increasingly divided between those who have already accumulated wealth and those who serve them, between those who can afford to age comfortably and those who work until they can't. The Villages works because it's insulated, but the model isn't sustainable at scale. Florida can't become one giant retirement community maintained by workers who commute from somewhere cheaper. At some point, the math breaks down. Florida's small towns are beautiful, but beauty built for retirement and tourism creates a different kind of place. When the people who work can't afford to stay, you don't have a town anymore. You have a resort that looks like one.